What's up, guys? Horror Man back for another review. So today we're going to take a look at the Kickstarter Spawn figure. Now this is the classic Spawn. You do get, three different choices of which one you wanted, and I went with the classic masked Spawn. So just taking a look at the packaging here, it is pretty large. You do get this kind of like large Spawn logo on the side. It's got that like spot varnish look. Now it is red, it's a little hard to see. I'll put a little extra light on it so you can see it, but it does look really cool. Now the black box will leave fingerprints galore, so it's kind of hard to avoid that, but it's a really nice looking box. And then on the front of the box you can see Spawn multiple times, and then you have these spot varnished, one on the bottom, and then the rest of them are kind of just like that regular red with the skull and the A. You get the Todd McFarlane or Spawn logo at the top and the bottom of the box. Again, it's a little hard to see unless you put a little bit more light on it. And then at the bottom you get a little bit more of that legal stuff and the UPC or barcode. And then on one of the sides it does say 1994 to 2021. Again, you get that cool Spawn or McFarlane logo. And once you take the slipcover off, you do have like a really cool box underneath, kind of like a shoebox style. And again, you have that McFarlane Toys Spawn logo, and then you have this little red tab. And once you open the box, you do get this certificate of authenticity inside. And then you also get this comparison checklist for some reason, comparing the original Spawn to this Spawn. So it kind of tells you the differences between them. And then once you've taken the paperwork off, you just take this foam insert off, and then you can see the blister card and some of the extra accessories within. Now what's really cool is these are all the extra pieces for like the rewards as the Kickstarter kept going. They kind of unlocked all these different things. So those are not packaged inside of the blister card, but you do get them inside of the box itself. There's nothing on the back of the box, but you do, of course, get the comic inside. So once you just open up the resealable packaging, the comic is right in the back. And you can see it's really good looking cover. It's an updated artwork, which looks really cool. It just says image number 1. And the comic itself does come in like a little plastic case, so it's well protected, it's not damaged or anything like that. And the clamshell packaging is resealable, so if you want, you can seal this back, no problem. But the actual figure, like the tray it sits in, does have some plastic things that you have to cut. So even though you can put it back in there, there is still some work you have to do, to take Spawn completely out of the packaging. Alright, so here he is outside of the packaging. This is a really important release to Todd McFarlane and Spawn. And I think if you've been collecting Spawn for a long time, or remember reading it as a kid, or maybe you had the toy, it really hits a lot of nostalgia points, so I like that they put so much into the presentation of this. Plus it's a Kickstarter thing, it's not like you would just go in a store and see it on the shelf, so you really do feel like you get your money's worth, plus you also feel like they're really trying to make this the figure it's supposed to be. And then little things like the way they packaged it, in shipping, they did a box within a box. The box that was inside of a box had little plastic corners on it, and then even the figure itself had like these little foam pieces behind it, in between the figure and the actual cape, so it kind of protected it like from having any kind of paint bleeding onto the figure, or any other mishaps that might have happened. So I appreciate the presentation, and then just the overall, the attempts to make sure the figure got here safely. So moving on past the packaging here, we'll take a look at the close-ups of just both head sculpts that you get with this version. This is the classic edition. Alright, so taking a look at the masked head sculpt, and this is the regular head sculpt for this figure. It looks pretty good for the most part. It definitely has like that classic comic style of Spawn. But then again, it kind of has that more modernized, like realistic look to it. And I say that because you can see like his teeth kind of through the mask. You could just like kind of see the impression of where they are. And I remember like in the old, Spawn comics or the cartoon, you really couldn't see that. It was more like Spider-Man or Deadpool, where you really don't see anything. But this one definitely has a lot more details like in that mask. The one thing about it, I feel like the jaws on like the jawline is kind of wide, so it kind of makes his like the bottom half of his head look a little wider and the top look a little smaller. So it could be just the design of the Spawn mask that makes it look more like that, but it's definitely like what I'm seeing. I really do like the eyes. They almost look like they glow, so they did a really good job with the green on the eyes. Now I will say one thing about this head sculpt is that it looks far better from like the profile or like a 3/4 turn view as opposed to just straight on. In an angle like this, man, it just looks exactly what I think Spawn should look like. So I'm very, very happy with this look. Like I said, straight on, it's not quite there for me, but on an angle like this, it looks perfect. And then here's the other side of his head sculpt. And again, really cool from like an angled shot. I just really like the look of that. Now, one thing about this head sculpt that I'm already noticing is that it's very loose. So it's a little more loose than I would want. But besides that, you got a lot of gapping. So like the neck, if you turn his head a certain way, you can see this huge hole right here. And it's basically just opening up this huge gap. So basically what it is the neck is a separate piece and the head is a separate piece. But with this interchangeable head sculpt, which is basically the hamburger head or screaming head, and it does look really good, but it's only got one big, very strange looking peg. So it's going to be a different articulation system for it. So I'll go ahead and interchange the head now. I'm going to try to change this head sculpt on camera, but I did want to give you a little bit better shot of them together, so hopefully that looks a little bit better. So yeah, it is a much different head sculpt. So this should pop off, and that pops off fairly easily. And again, man, it is a weird, really weird head sculpt. Like, look at the side here, how it goes up on an angle. Very strange. And again, the head and the neck are a separate piece. So they are going to be much different than this one, which is just that solid piece. So hopefully this pegs in fairly easily. We'll try it. It's pretty much in there. Alright, so here is the interchangeable head, and of course this is the hamburger screaming Spawn head. And I'm definitely really happy they included this. I mean, just like at first glance, it looks amazing. I'm really, really happy with this. The teeth look really good. You can really see the inside of the mouth, all the damage on his face, all the burns. The eyes, again, they almost look like they can glow. They got a really nice paint scheme going on. Just really impressive with the level of sculpt. The only problem is that it does not have an articulated neck. So as soon as you try to turn this into a different position, you get this weird, like, unpainted part of the ball peg, which looks terrible. I mean, it looks absolutely terrible. So they really didn't think that through. I mean, I know this was an extra piece that wasn't originally advertised, but they really should have done a better job hiding that. Besides that, it does look badass. I mean, it's really cool looking. And you can turn, like, this angle looks pretty good, but it's just turning this head sculpt the other way that just looks awful. That looks awful. So I'm not happy with that. I really wish they would have done a better job. But overall, yeah, I mean, the details in the sculpt really do look good. Really good details in it. So it's a nice assortment. I mean, if you're a Spawn fan, I feel like the classic is definitely the way to go. You gotta have the masked, head sculpt with the Spawn figure. That's my opinion, and I think that's a lot of people's opinions. But overall, I do think you get a nice selection of head sculpts, and considering this wasn't really advertised with the figure originally, even though it does have a really weird neck peg, it's still cool that at least they included it. Alright, now taking a look at the rest of the figure here, starting with the torso, you do get some really cool features on this figure compared to your usual Spawn figures. Now before I get to those, just taking a look at this portion of the cape, I really like how it kind of curves up like that. It's kind of like a spike or like kind of like a horned look on his shoulders, so I think that's pretty cool. And you can kind of see how it's like tightly wrapped around his shoulders. I like the little like line textures and all those little sculpting details. Really nice looking. Now, of course, one of the upgrades, one of the first upgrades, I think it might have actually been the first upgrade, you actually get realistic chains with this Spawn, which looks really good. I particularly like this size chain on the neck. Alright, and then looking at the rest of the torso here, I'm just going to start with the chains. Like I said, I mean, I feel like these chains are really well proportioned, but these are just way too big. Now, they could have gone with a bigger size than the neck, which I understand because from the drawings I looked at, they are usually a little bit bigger on like his waist or whatever compared to the ones on the neck. I just think these are far too big. If you look at them with like just comparing it to his hand, I mean, he would fit one chain length just in his thumb. So it's huge. It's just way too big to me. It just kind of throws off the scale of the figure a little bit. But again, I do like that they're realistic chains. I don't want to knock them. I just think they might have went just a little too big. So just looking at the rest of the torso here, I really do like this little spiked guard or this spiked band that's right around his bicep. Looks really cool. You got the red gloves and you got the red mixed in the torso and then into the like shorts area. You got some really cool like knuckle dusters with the spikes. I really like the look of that. Some nice clawed fingers, which are always a must for a Spawn figure. I really like these hands. The pose going on looks really nice. And then of course you have the ammo pouches that go all the way around his thigh. Looks really good. And of course you do have, you know, like the little like shorts piece with the red and with the different trim going on. So overall, really good details in the sculpt. I do like the upgrades. And the skull belt buckle looks amazing. So really nice detail on that. And I really like how well it matches up with the collar piece. And then finally down to the leg portion of the figure, you can see he does have those same wraps like you saw on his bicep, but here he has them on his calves. So you got this single wrap and you have the more double spiked wrap. And then of course this version doesn't have the big boot like the modern Spawn one does, so it is a much different look compared to the modern Spawn. So this is probably the biggest difference when you compare the two. And of course the spike does go all the way around both of the calves. So really nice details on the figure overall. So the biggest feature this has, literally, is the cape. And it's kind of like the elephant in the room, really, because some people love it, some people hate it, some people just wish it was removable. And I'm definitely one of those people. I actually really like the cape, and I admire that they did so much to acknowledge the original figure and make it look like a modern day version of that figure. But I just wish it was removable. That's my only issue with it. But moving on, just looking at the detail in the cape, it does look amazing. I mean, the detail in the sculpt is through the roof. I really like the way it looks, to be honest with you. I really like this portion here. Again, a lot of wrinkled details. Just crazy sculpting in this cape. I do wish that if they would have done anything different with this, if not having it removable, I wish the collar piece was posable, because it's always blowing over to the right. You just can't change that. So I think that's my only really gripe about the pre-posed, is they should have done this part with a hinge. And then here it is from the front. And yeah, like I said, I mean, with the collar piece, it's just always blowing over in one direction. I do wish you could just kind of put a little hinge, at least right here, just to bend that piece over to kind of open that up a little bit. But you can see it is very big. It's a huge piece on it, and it definitely will take up some shelf space because it's so big. Now, one of the features this has, just like the original, you can actually fold portions of the cape in, which is really cool. That actually really helps you to display it. So if you wanted to display this on a shelf, maybe you could put your figures over here, and then he could be on the far left side so he doesn't blast your other figures off the shelf. Now you can fold this a little bit, but that's pretty much it. You can kind of go farther, but it runs into that collar piece. Again, since it's not adjustable, it can't come in any farther than that. So that's the extent of what it can fold up. So I'm a little disappointed that it can't fold up like more of like a shell, like to fold up completely around them. But I do like the feature, but I just feel like it works perfect on this side, not so well on this side. Alright, so we'll go ahead and take a look at the articulation now. So we already kind of took a look at the cape. The cape definitely is part of the articulation. So with this head sculpt, we've also kind of taken a look at this too. But you can see you can go all the way left, all the way right. You can look very far down. You can look fairly far back, and you can look up a little bit. Again, you got a little bit of gappage going on here. And then, of course, as we showed the hamburger head, you really only have just the one neck portion that can move. So the arms are going to be limited for sure. You can go about that far out, about that far down. You do have a swivel at the bicep, though it really doesn't give you a whole lot. You only get about that much on your elbow. It's not too bad. The hands can cradle really nice, so I do like the hinges on that. And then you can swivel the hands a bit. So that looks pretty cool. You can't really go up real high because of the shoulders being so restricted. So that's pretty much it for what you get there. You can move the waist pretty good. And then you can kind of angle a little bit up and down, but the cape's so heavy it does nothing really. So there's really no ab crunch. You really just get that waist swivel, and then you can kind of bend around a little bit at the waist. The legs can go out pretty far. They can go forward about that far. You do get double hinge knees on here, which is nice. So you do get some posability in the legs, more than I thought, honestly. The feet can go forward and up really high. And then you do have a toe cut. And then you can kind of swivel the leg a little bit, but not so much. So it's okay articulation, considering he's got this giant cape. There really wasn't much you were going to do anyway. So I think it's not bad. It's clearly an improvement over the original from 1994. And one more thing worth noting about this figure, especially with like the sculpt and articulation, is it does have a bit of a pre-posed or like kind of action figure elements to it, and not just the cape. You can see it in the torso. It's kind of curved a little bit, so it's kind of in a pre-posed look. So we'll look at all of Spawn's accessories together, but I did want to show you just exactly what the accessories are that you get in the blister card with this figure itself. So the only ones you get in the box with the figure are going to be this really cool like assault rifle gun, and then you also have 4 different interchangeable hands. So these are the only ones you'll get in the box with Spawn. Alright, so here's all the accessories that this figure comes with. So just starting with some of the ones we've already looked at, you do get the interchangeable head sculpt, which to me is probably the best accessory you get. Even though it's not perfect, I really do like that you get both looks for Spawn. Now of course you do get these awesome pre-posed hands on the figure itself, like right out of the box. And I think they're the best hands that actually come with the figure. They really kind of fit the look of like what I remember from like the covers and stuff. So I do like the look of those. You also get 2 other sets of hands. You get one that has like a circular, clearly like a gripping hand, and then you get one that's a bit more of a relaxed gripping hands. And they both look really good, no real complaints. You only get that like single hinge on here though, so you're not going to get any other different hinge on that. So hopefully you can get the poses that you want. Now you also get this really cool assault rifle. I like the color to it. It's got a bit of like a two-tone, really cool looking weapon. I like the blade. If you can see that, there is a blade on the front of that. So pretty cool looking piece. Now of course you get the Spawn stand, which you do get stands for a lot of these McFarlane toys. And it does say record-setting action figure on that. You get this amazing sword, really nice details on there. I love the Spawn skull on that, and then you also get the Spawn logo, so that looks pretty cool. And I had this sitting up so you could see just how big it actually is. It's almost as big as the figure itself, so it's pretty cool. You also get these like necroplasm pieces, so you get this little like dagger. It's really small, it's just this little green dagger. I do like that. And then finally, you get this necro blast effect, so it's pretty cool. And then you can see where it actually hooks on to the hand. Alright, so here he is holding the small necro dagger and the necro blast. And he holds the dagger pretty good in the relaxed gripping hand or the circular gripping hand. But the Necro Blast only really seems like it's supposed to be for his right hand. And if you look at the other side, you can see how the blast wraps around the like that little knuckle duster. And it really just seems like it's only meant for the right hand. So just keep that in mind whenever you're posing it. And here he is holding the large assault rifle. And even though he doesn't have that double-hinged elbows, you could still get him in a double-handed pose, which is really cool. So yeah, I mean, they're not double-hinged, but they really do have a fairly good range of motion at the elbow. And it looks really cool. I really like how big the weapon is. Definitely fits that Spawn aesthetic. Now, it is possible to get him in a double-handed sword pose, but really, it's extremely tough to do it. Unfortunately, the handle really isn't long enough to put two hands fully on the handle. So it's not necessarily the articulation that's at fault, it's really the weapon itself. But it can look pretty cool if you get it in a double-handed pose, but most likely you're going to want to put this in a single-handed pose. Now the only problem with the single-handed pose is that he really can't hold the sword that well. It's so heavy and it just wants to fall out of his hands because these are more of like a loose grip hand. So you can still get him in a pose with the sword, but you might have to really work on this a bit. So you basically have to use another hand to really help stabilize this blade, otherwise it gets really loose. And you can see once I take it out of that hand, you can see how loose it is in this gripping hand. It really doesn't hold it very well. And because these are so, they're the circular gripping hand, it would work on the handle itself, but because the pommel isn't removable, you really can't do anything with this, and it could be a mistake on McFarlane's part. I think maybe he wanted that pommel to be removable, but you cannot use these hands on this sword, which is very strange. And ironically enough, they also will not fit on the gripping, like on the handle of the gun. So these gripping hands are almost useless for most of the weapons here. But again, yeah, I mean, if you want to stabilize this, you really kind of need to use the other hand to stabilize the blade. And then just real quick, the interchangeable hands do come out really easily. They have these really thick pegs, and they come out very smoothly, and they go in just as easy. So I really do like the peg system. Really nice quality. I definitely don't see those breaking at all. So we've already done a comparison with the 1994 figure, but I think even more than that, people really want to see the comparison with the MK11 Spawn figure. And here they are next to each other. Now, of course, this is more in line with the modern Spawn, so that would probably compare better with the modern version. But you can see these are definitely clearly much different looking figures. So you have the more original classic Spawn figure, then you have the more modern, almost like a movie Spawn figure in my opinion. Like when I first saw this, it really looked like the movie version. So I kind of like having both of them because I have the perfect classic one, then I have the kind of more movie or modern version. Now, besides just the look, the articulation is definitely where things kind of differ between the both of them. So for like this figure, you actually had an upper torso articulation, which you don't have with this version, which is very disappointing in my opinion. Of course you get the boot with this version, which is really cool, but you do get some limitations with the feet on this version. Like, he has a little bit more hard time standing, whereas this one really doesn't have much of a hard time standing. And the cape on this one is pretty lackluster. I mean, it's okay if you just want a regular, you know, like fighting or like whatever pose, but you can't get any kind of like gliding pose or anything like that. So the cape is kind of lame on this figure. So in my opinion, you kind of need both, but if you only have this version, I'm not sure if this one's like blowing this one away, to be honest with you. As far as look, I really love the look of this, and it definitely comes loaded with accessories and everything. But this one, for the price, it really does have better articulation, so it's a tough call. Here he is with one of the older Spawn figures. I think this is one of the original like Commando Spawns or something like that. And then he had like a removable like bandana piece too, so if you wanted to take that off. But you could definitely see some similarities between these guys. And then even older than these, or than that one, you also have this version, which is more in line with that 1994 version. I think this one actually came out in 1995. But you can see he's got this huge gun. But definitely a big, you know, scale comparison between both figures. Kind of went from 5-inch to 6-inch to now 7-inch. And if you do own that old Commando Spawn, if you could actually take off that bandana piece with a little finagling, I was actually able to get it onto this Spawn, and it looks pretty cool. So it's a little bonus if you do have some of these old Spawn figures. Another cool little bonus of owning these old Spawn figures is that the guns were typically oversized. So these oversized guns look a little bit more normal on a 7-inch scale figure. So I was able to, you know, put these guns into these gripping hands. So, you know, if you add the guns, add the scarf, you really have a much different looking Spawn. So it's pretty cool that this stuff still matches up pretty well with this modern figure. Here he is next to a couple of the modern McFarlane DC figures. So you have the Batman Who Laughs, and then you have the Red Hood. And you can see the scales pretty good here. I definitely like how everything matches up. For the last McFarlane Toys comparison, here's another vintage comparison for you. So you have the Movie Maniacs Jason, and that's from Jason Goes to Hell. And he has a custom freak, custom hockey mask on. And then you have the Edward Scissorhands from the movie Edward Scissorhands, and this was also a Movie Maniacs figure. So even though these are older figures, they still look pretty cool next to the modern Spawn. For your Storm Collectibles comparison, here he is with the Reptile from the Mortal Kombat trilogy, and then you also have the Cyrax Cyber Ninja figure. And again, really good scale comparison. I think these guys would work great in a photo. Here he is with the NECA Toys TMNT 1990 Casey Jones and the Raph in Disguise, and again, these look pretty good together. And if you're looking for a really cool Batman to go along with your comic version of Spawn, I definitely think this Dark Horse Comics version of Batman made by NECA Toys looks perfect with him. But then if you also want to put like a movie version, you do have the 1989 Batman, which is a little small compared to him. So I would definitely say the comic version looks awesome. But both of these are made by NECA Toys. And just for one more NECA comparison, here he is next to the 1990 Pennywise, if you want some kind of stand-in for Violator. And then you have this King Kong, which is a bit of an original King Kong, but it definitely looks like the 33 version with that head sculpt. And then you have the Super Shredder from the TMNT 2 sequel, Secret of the Ooze. So you can see how the variations of sizes are within a 7-inch scale, but they all look really cool with them. So I think these will all look great on the shelf together. And then for the final comparison, here he is next to one of Todd McFarlane's oldest creations, or at least collaboration creations, if you want to say that. You have Venom from the original Spider-Man comic series. and this is part of the Marvel Legends made by Hasbro. And he's a little short compared to what he usually would look like in the comic, but I think if you just want to put them next to each other on a shelf, he looks pretty cool. And just to give you one other Marvel Legend in here, just to show you how small some of the other ones look, you can see this Wolverine is way, way shorter. Alright, so that's my review of the Kickstarter Spawn figure. And for the most part, I'm pretty happy with the figure. Like many people, I'm pretty much on the fence about the same thing, which is the cape. In one sense, I really like it, and it's like a sculpting marvel, really. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, the texturing, the style of it, it really looks like it jumped right off the comics. But unfortunately, it's just not practical. And there's certain design aspects that just weren't right. So, like, for one, you can't close the left side of it. And it's mainly because the bottom of the cape is too long in one portion. So as soon as you cross over to a certain side, it's going to knock the figure over. So also the collar is in the way. So it's got that problem going on. But the biggest problem is it's simply not removable. I think that would have been the easiest way to solve the whole situation of this cape, just by making it removable. Now, even though it's not removable, one of the nicest parts about this is that, yeah, you can put the cape behind Spawn, so you can clearly see the figure, and if you want to display things next to each other, you have that ability. But past those nitpicks about the cape, you just have to really take in how cool this figure looks. I mean, it really is, it's packing all the heat of all the stuff that you should get with the deluxe figure. I mean, the weapons are really good. I love the oversized look to them. I mean, I love the little additional pieces that you get here. And then finally, I mean, you gotta love the fact that you get the hamburger head with this one. So, I mean, the accessories are really good. The cape is functional. I love the chains. And the sculpt and details are really good. But it definitely has some of the same flaws that we always see in McFarlane stuff. We got a little bit of the staction type of poses going on. We got some of the issues with holding the weapons, and again, he's got an elaborate cape. But it's McFarlane. This is what we expected. I mean, he's basically remaking a figure he made back in '94. So if you look at it that way, you're getting exactly what you thought you would get, but a lot more, and it's modernized. So taking all the pros and cons into consideration, and also adding the fact that I really love these toys in the '90s, and Spawn was really one of those characters that I kind of was first introduced to after I was already reading the Marvel stuff. Like, this was like the more darker comics that I loved reading. You know, I really like the figure, and I can appreciate what it is. I know what it is, you know, I know what it's trying to be. But if you go into this just looking for the most modern, most articulated Spawn figure ever made, you might be a little disappointed here. But I think if you're just a fan of the classic Spawn and you kind of grew up with this stuff, you're definitely going to see a lot of nostalgia here, and you're going to want to have this. So thanks for watching my review. If you liked the video, please like it. Leave a comment or question if you have one. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. And until next time, guys, see ya.